Enterprise has been dodging attempts by Starfleet to call them back to Earth because they want to be ready to rescue Kirk and McCoy when the time comes, and to also continue their investigation before the assassins can slip themselves and or any evidence off the ship. Starfleet then tells Excelsior to look for them. A mistake, since Sulu gives the Starfleet equivalent of piss off and goes back to bed. With their search allowed to continue uninterrupted, they expand to looking for uniforms, now that Chekhov has found Klingon blood on board, including this guy, the geekiest man in Starfleet. They finally find the boots, but alas, they're in the locker of a dude named Dax, and instead of having spots, this Dax appears to be part Ent, so the search begins again. Kirk and Bones soon begin their escape with Marty as help, who turns out to be a shapeshifter. Thus begins the Judy Blume version of The Great Escape. There's a lot of encouraging signs along the way for this brilliant plan of walking to safety. But hey, there are some really kick-ass nipple-hardening shots of the frozen wastes. Just watch out for Kurt Russell. Just kidding. There's nothing to worry about out here. So, who brought the 200-foot ladder? Anyone? Well, we can either take the long way around or just cut away to the Enterprise. Anyone else in favor of that? And sure enough, the Enterprise detects that they've emerged from under the anti-beaming shield. The cold is extreme, and poor Bones, who's down to about 60 pounds soaking wet, is ready to give up and die. But Kirk reveals that when we saw Spock touch his shoulder before they went over onto Kronos 1, that he put a tracer on his back. And if you're a continuity hound, you can see it there throughout all the scenes before this. Still, continuity isn't enough to get them rescued. Enterprise has got to bluff its way past the Klingon sentries in order to beam them up before they freeze to death. This isn't too bad, because even though the Enterprise can pick up Kirk's tracer from who knows how many light years away, Klingon border security is so awesome that it can't even tell the difference between a Klingon ship and a Federation one. It just sees a nice big triangle. Well, to even out this gross inadequacy, Uhura, the comm officer on the most famous ship in the fleet with a long career of that doohickey in her ear, has had all the knowledge of Klingon sucked from her head, and they've got to translate the simple commands with reference books while an extra gestures at them. Waiting on the surface in our little camp, Kirk shows he's not above hitting a woman. He's upset that they've been betrayed. Marty has led them into a trap to be executed while trying to escape so that she can get a pardon. This situation calls for a fight because... because it does. Now, the form to choose for such a fight is tricky. You might think you should just go for a big brute, but you'd already seen that Kirk had beaten one in the prison, and he'd sucker punched her in her nimble form already, and who knows what kind of beating he'd give to the little kid. So she follows the experience of many 90s-era fighter video game players. When in doubt, mirror match. Plus, who knows, Kirk might get distracted and hit the wrong one. The fight is interrupted by the Klingons' arrival, and poor Marty gets vaporized. Still, at least it's warm. Kirk decides to take advantage of the old action hero staple. Get the bad guys to tell you your plans.
Since you're all going to die anyway, why not tell you? His name is...
Oh, no! Son of a... Son of a... Well, crap. Now we're going to have to go back to the detective plot. Luckily, there are no ears more sensitive than that of a hungover Scotsman, so Scotty finds the bloody uniforms thanks to a rattling air ventilation hatch. He goes rushing up to Kirk and Spock to compare notes, only for the group to stumble across the dead bodies. Yeah, I like this movie, but the sequence borders on a really macabre Scooby-Doo episode. The uniforms belong to the two dead guys, so they figure someone must have assassinated the assassins. Spock and Kirk trick the assassin into thinking that these two guys are still alive and in sickbay, and it's revealed to be Valeris. Spock is understandably pissed off, and when she refuses to cooperate, he forcibly mind melds with her, revealing that Admiral Cartwright, General Chang, and the Romulan ambassador were all in on it as well. It was a case of enemies choosing to work together solely to continue their desire to not work together, an extremely odd-sounding yet somewhat understandable situation, given the undiscovered country. Hamlet's soliloquy is one of the most famous in literature, so it feels a bit silly to do a deconstruction, however briefly. And yet, since I haven't found anyone out there that has commented on this aspect beyond the obvious in this film, I guess I must. As we established earlier, the undiscovered country was death for Hamlet, but Gorkin called it the future. Now that substitution explains everything about what's happening here. The undiscovered country, from whose bourne no traveler returns, puzzles the will and makes us rather bear those ills we have than fly to others we know not of. Thus conscience doth make cowards of us all, and thus the native hue of resolution is sicklied o'er with the pale cast of thought, and enterprises of great pitch and moment with this regard their currents turn awry, and lose the name of action. As Hamlet does not take his own life because he fears what might come after, so too will people like Valeris and Chang not allow the life that they have always known to come to an end. Better to bear those ills we have than fly to others we know not of. They say, I'd rather live with the imperfect world I now live in than the brave new world you claim is waiting, for how do I know it won't be worse? All right there, in the words that Chang himself was speaking, the ramblings of a Danish emo. Valeris, for her part, reveals her reasons and what was really happening in that scene earlier with Spock, where she was seeking logical reassurance and all he offered was blind hope. To her, the logic is perfectly sound. How can you trust someone who will conspire to murder their own leader? Of course, the reason is because this is still a prejudice, to presume that Chang and his followers represent the Klingons any more than Cartwright's view represents that of the Federation. The easiest way to make a prejudice seem reasonable is to couch your language and reasoning with the use of a label rather than by anything that conveys being people. It's easy to hate a faceless group, not so easy to hate a person who has done nothing to you. Valeris gives up a lot, but doesn't have the location of the peace conference. But luckily someone gave it to Sulu, who passes it off to Kirk without a moment's hesitation. There's an unfortunately lost line where Sulu was to say something to the effect of, I always hoped that if I had to choose between my country and my friends, I'd have the courage to choose my friends. This shows all the more how out of step his behavior was in Star Trek V to so casually betray Kirk. And again, why it's best just to pretend there was no Star Trek V. At least, that's what my therapist keeps telling me.
There's a bird of prey on the lookout for us, and she can fire while cloaked.
Surely not.
Yes, it can, and don't call me Shirley. While Enterprise and Excelsior are on the way, since their transmissions are going to be jammed to prevent any warning, Kirk and Spock have a final heart-to-heart, reflecting on their recent failures.
Is it possible that we two, you and I, have grown so old and so inflexible that we have outlived our usefulness?
And have you seen my chocolate bar? I can't find it anywhere. As you can imagine, though, these two are about to prove that they may be flawed, but they can still definitely be of use at the peace conference.
Madam Chancellor, members of the Diplomatic Corps, honored guests.
And dumbasses. Oh, but first, Chang's bird of prey arrives to intercept. He fires on Enterprise, and they're helpless, until Sulu arrives, so, as he puts it, there's something else to be shot at now. I'm sure that filled his crew with a lot of confidence in his leadership. What's sad for all of them, though, is that Shatner insisted that no one needs to show up and rescue Kirk. So what follows is a completely sideways move. After spending time establishing that Excelsior has been scanning for gaseous anomalies, and then bringing the Excelsior here, suddenly it's been the Enterprise that's been scanning gaseous anomalies the whole time, and the ones that cook up the torpedo that reveals the bird of prey. And what's worse is that Kirk did need someone to come and rescue him just 15 minutes ago. So what it really means is that no one is allowed to rescue Kirk unless it's Spock or Scotty. And once again, Star Trek screws the Asians. So Spock and Bones put the device in a torpedo while Chang quotes Shakespeare at them during battle, making him the Klingon Picard, I suppose. But it does pay off in the end.
To be or not to be.
And now revealed, it's an easy target for the two Federation ships. However, since the Enterprise is the stuff of legends, and the Excelsior is the new golden child, and this is a Kia of prey you'll remember is small enough to land like a shuttle, then blowing it away seems kind of like two linebackers raping a dwarf. So our heroes show up to intervene as a Klingon assassin moves in to kill the President, and Kirk runs up and knocks the President off the podium. Spock shows up with Valeris to reveal the jig is up, but the assassin prepares to kill her to cover it all up. Luckily he's foiled by, you guessed it, the Kool-Aid Man. Oh yeah! They peel his mask off, revealing none other than Colonel West. Man, what a great disguise. This guy's a frickin' shapeshifter. Well, with that, it's no doubt time for a speech. But with the President and Kirk up there, you know where this is going. Yo, Prez, I'm real happy for you, and I'm gonna let you finish. But Kirk extends an olive branch to Gorkin's daughter.
You've restored my father's faith.
you've restored my sons.
As they prepare to leave, Sulu and the Excelsior crew salute the Enterprise, except for Tuvok, who's off sulking somewhere. Enterprise receives orders to return to space dock to be decommissioned, and Kirk utters the line from Peter Pan, "Second star to the right, and straight on until morning." Peter Pan, the tale of the boy who never grew up, to show that Spock was wrong. Age has not dulled them, that they remain heroes, flawed though they might occasionally be, that they always had been. And as a cap to the 25th anniversary, that the old adventures are always there to be seen again and again. Sure, with dated effects, dialogue, fashions, etc., but nevertheless, still timeless. Follow-up. Annoying character goes to the Romulan ambassador for being barely lifelike. Keeping in mind that all scores are relative to the other films, Star Trek VI The Undiscovered Country is 9 out of 10. The mystery is sadly weaker than what it could have been, and some of Plummer's Shakespeare quoting gets a bit too random during the fight. But overall, it more than succeeds, both as a good tale about coping with an uncertain future and as a final farewell to the original cast. While some may object to Meyer's continued militaristic and flawed view of the Federation, the film nevertheless serves as a celebration of Star Trek.
I am constant as the Northern Star.
I'd give real money if he'd shut up.